The hallways of Westlake High School were filled with the usual Monday morning chaos. Students rushed to their lockers, chatting loudly about weekend adventures and dreading the week ahead. Among them was Zoe Williams, a new transfer student who had just moved to town 3 weeks ago. At 16, Zoe stood out with her confident stride, close-cropped natural hair, and quiet demeanor. She kept to herself mostly, her dark eyes observant as she navigated the complex social hierarchy of her new school. What most students didn't know about Zoe was that she wasn't just any new kid. She had been adopted by Dominic Toretto, known to the world as Vin Diesel, when she was 8 years old. Her biological parents had been close friends with the action star before they died in a tragic accident. Dom had stepped up without hesitation, bringing Zoe into his family and raising her with the same values he lived by: loyalty, strength, and standing up for what's right. Dom had taught Zoe many things: how to defend herself, how to fix cars, and most importantly, how to handle difficult situations with grace. Family isn't just blood, he'd always told her. It's who you choose to stand beside, who you fight for, and who fights for you. Zoe had begged her dad to let her attend a regular high school, away from the spotlight that followed him everywhere. She wanted to be known for who she was, not for who her father was. Dom understood and respected her wish, though it hadn't been easy for him to agree. "Just promise me one thing," he had said before her first day. "Be yourself. Don't let anyone push you around, but remember, with strength comes responsibility." At the other end of Westlake's social spectrum was Brandon Miller, the school's infamous bully. A senior with an athletic build and a perpetual scowl, Brandon ruled through fear and intimidation. His father was the school's biggest donor and a local business magnate, which gave Brandon a sense of untouchable privilege. Teachers looked the other way when complaints arose, and students learned it was easier to stay out of his path. As Zoe made her way to her locker, she was unaware that she had appeared on Brandon's radar. He watched her from across the hall, annoyed by this new girl who didn't seem intimidated by him like everyone else. In Brandon's world, that was a challenge that couldn't go unanswered. "New target acquired," he muttered to his followers, setting the day's events in motion. The first attack came during chemistry class. Zoe had always excelled in science, and when she correctly answered a question that had stumped the rest of the class, Brandon's resentment deepened. "Teacher's pet," he whispered loudly enough for those around him to hear. "Trying to make the rest of us look stupid?" Zoe merely raised an eyebrow and turned back to her notes. Her father had warned her about bullies, explained how their behavior often stemmed from insecurity. She wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of a reaction, but Brandon wasn't used to being ignored. At lunch, he deliberately bumped into her, causing her tray to clatter to the floor. The cafeteria fell silent as food splattered across Zoe's new sneakers. "Oops," Brandon said with mock innocence. "Didn't see you there. Maybe you should be more careful." Zoe took a deep breath, recalling her father's words about choosing her battles. With calm dignity, she knelt to clean up the mess. "Here, let me help," offered Maya, a quiet girl from Zoe's English class. It was the first friendly gesture anyone had made toward Zoe since she arrived. "Thanks," Zoe said with a genuine smile. "That's Brandon Miller," Maya explained as they cleaned together. "His dad practically owns half the town, so he thinks he owns the school. He's been worse than usual lately since his parents are getting divorced and his dad's company is having problems." Zoe nodded, filing away this information. Understanding someone didn't excuse their behavior, but it helped to know where it came from. After school, Zoe headed to the parking lot where her modest used Honda waited, another request she'd made to her father, wanting to blend in rather than arrive in one of his luxury cars. As she approached, her heart sank. All 4 tires had been slashed, and crude words had been keyed into the driver's side door. A note under the windshield wiper read simply, "Go back where you came from." Zoe's hands trembled, not with fear but with a slow-burning anger. She pulled out her phone, hesitated, then put it away. She wouldn't call Dom. Not yet. This was her battle to fight. "Looks like someone doesn't want you here," Brandon's voice came from behind her. He stood with three of his friends, all wearing smug expressions. Maybe you should take the hint. Why? Zoe asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. What have I ever done to you? Brandon stepped closer. You exist. You walk around like you belong here when you don't. This is my school. It's everyone's school, Zoe replied. And I have as much right to be here as anyone. Brandon's face darkened. Listen, girl, my name is Zoe, she interrupted, standing her ground. And I'm not going anywhere. Brandon moved closer, towering over her. We'll see about that. Just then, a teacher walked into the parking lot and Brandon and his friends quickly dispersed, but not before Brandon whispered, "This isn't over." Zoe called for a tow truck and waited, using the time to think. She wouldn't tell Dom about the car yet he'd either come storming down to the school or pull her out entirely. Neither would solve the problem. Instead, she called Maya, the only friendly face she'd encountered. Can I ask you something? Zoe said when Maya answered. What does it take to stand up to Brandon? There was a long pause before Maya answered. No one ever has, not successfully, anyway. Zoe's resolve strengthened. Then maybe it's time someone did. The next day, Zoe arrived at school in a rental car, her face set with determination. She'd spent the evening practicing what her father had taught her about confidence and conflict resolution. Physical fighting was a last resort, but presence and assurance could often prevent things from escalating that far. Word of what happened to her car had spread, and students watched her with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. How would the new girl respond? Most expected her to keep her head down or transfer schools, as others had done before. Instead, Zoe walked directly to Brandon's locker, where he stood surrounded by his usual entourage. We need to talk, she said calmly. Brandon's friend snickered, but something in Zoe's demeanor made Brandon pause. About what? He asked, feigning innocence. About my car. About why you feel threatened by someone you don't even know. About how this ends. Brandon laughed, but there was a hint of uneasiness in his eyes. Is that a threat? No, Zoe replied. It's an opportunity for both of us. This can stop now, with a conversation, or it can continue and get much worse. Your choice. For a moment, Brandon seemed at a loss for words. No one had ever confronted him so directly. You don't know who you're dealing with, he finally managed, trying to regain his footing. Zoe smiled slightly. Funny. I was about to say the same thing. The confrontation at Brandon's locker became the talk of Westlake High. By lunchtime, most students were watching the brewing conflict with fascination. Brandon, unable to back down without losing face, had escalated his harassment. He'd knocked Zoe's books from her hands between classes and spread rumors about her background. I heard she got kicked out of her last school for fighting, one whisper went. I heard she's in witness protection, went another. Zoe ignored the rumors and maintained her composure, which only infuriated Brandon more. His need to prove his dominance was becoming desperate. The situation came to a head during physical education. The class was playing basketball, and Brandon deliberately tripped Zoe as she went for a layup. She fell hard, her elbow skidding painfully against the gym floor. Oops, Brandon said, mirroring his comment from the cafeteria. Didn't see you there. This time, Zoe didn't stay down. She rose slowly, eyes locked on Brandon. That's enough, she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent gym. What are you going to do about it? Brandon taunted, stepping closer. I'm going to give you one last chance to walk away, Zoe said evenly. Brandon laughed and gave her a slight push. Or what? What happened next happened so quickly that later, students would debate exactly what they saw. Zoe moved with practiced precision, using Brandon's momentum against him. A simple sidestep, a well-placed foot, and suddenly the school bully was on his back, looking up at the ceiling in shock. Zoe hadn't thrown a punch or used excessive force. She'd simply redirected his energy and let physics do the rest. It was a defensive move her father had taught her, effective but restrained. "My dad taught me that," she said quietly, looking down at Brandon. "Along with the importance of respect." Brandon scrambled to his feet, face burning with humiliation. "You're dead," he snarled, lunging toward her. This time, the PE teacher intervened. "That's enough. Both of you, principal's office. Now." Sitting outside Principal Garcia's office, Brandon glared at Zoe. "Do you have any idea who my father is?" he hissed. "Do you have any idea who mine is?" Zoe countered, though she knew it wasn't a fair comparison. She didn't want to use her father's fame as a shield. Inside the office, Principal Garcia looked tired. "This is the 5th incident involving you this semester, Brandon," she said, reviewing his file. "And Ms. Williams, while you're new here, physical altercations are not tolerated." "She attacked me," Brandon protested. "After you tripped me," Zoe pointed out. "There are 20 witnesses who saw it." "Regardless," the principal continued, "I need to call both your parents." Brandon smirked, confident his father's influence would protect him as it always had. Zoe, meanwhile, felt a mixture of dread and resignation. This wasn't how she wanted her father to find out about the situation. When asked for her emergency contact, Zoe reluctantly provided Dom's number, asking, "Could you just say you need to speak with Mr. Toretto? There's no need to mention his profession." Principal Garcia looked confused but agreed. An hour later, the office door opened, and Brandon's father stormed in, an imposing man in an expensive suit with the same entitled demeanor as his son. "This is ridiculous," he began without preamble. "My son is the victim here, and I expect this matter to be resolved immediately." "Mr. Miller," Principal Garcia started, "we have multiple reports that Brandon initiated the physical confrontation." "And who's accusing him?" "This new student." Mr. Miller gestured dismissively toward Zoe. "Where are her parents? I demand equal representation here." "I'm right here," came a deep, distinctive voice from the doorway. All heads turned to see Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel himself, filling the frame of the office door. Despite his casual attire of jeans and a fitted t-shirt, his presence was commanding. Eyes that had seen both the spotlight and real-life challenges surveyed the room before landing on his daughter. "You okay, Zoe?" he asked, his concern evident. "I'm fine, Dad," she assured him, though her voice trembled slightly. The room had fallen into stunned silence. Brandon's mouth hung open, his father momentarily speechless. Principal Garcia seemed to be struggling to maintain her professional composure. "Mr. Toretto," she finally managed, "thank you for coming on such short notice." Dom nodded and took a seat beside Zoe, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "So, what happened?" Over the next 20 minutes, both sides of the story emerged. Brandon, now visibly nervous, downplayed his actions, while his father repeatedly tried to steer the conversation toward Zoe's defensive maneuver in the gym. Dom listened quietly, his expression giving little away. When everyone had finished, he looked directly at Brandon. "You slashed my daughter's tires?" he asked, his tone deceptively calm. "Vandalized her car? Harassed her for weeks?" Brandon swallowed hard, suddenly finding it difficult to meet Dom's gaze. "I didn't." It wasn't what?" Dom pressed. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you've been targeting my daughter since she arrived." "Why?" When Brandon couldn't answer, Dom turned to Mr. Miller. "And you? You're teaching your son that money and influence put him above consequences. That's not preparing him for the real world, it's setting him up to fail." "Now see here," Mr. Miller blustered, trying to regain control of the situation. "Who do you think you are, coming in here and—" "I'm a father," Dom interrupted, his voice steady but powerful. "Just like you. The difference is, I've taught my daughter to stand up for herself with dignity, not to prey on others to feel powerful." He turned to Principal Garcia. "Zoe didn't start this, but she did defend herself. If that warrants punishment under your policies, we'll accept it." But I also expect appropriate consequences for the ongoing harassment and property damage. For perhaps the first time in her tenure, Principal Garcia found herself nodding in agreement with a parent challenging her authority. That seems fair, Mr. Toretto. Zoe will serve 1 day of detention for the physical altercation, as per our zero-tolerance policy. Brandon will serve 2 weeks of suspension and will be required to pay for the damages to Zoe's car. What? Mr. Miller exploded. This is outrageous. I'll have the school board review your position. Go ahead, Principal Garcia said with newfound confidence. I have documentation of every complaint against Brandon that I've had to sweep under the rug due to your donations. I think the board would find that very interesting. Mr. Miller fell silent, realizing he'd lost his leverage. As they left the office, Dom placed his arm around Zoe's shoulders. Brandon and his father walked ahead, the younger Miller casting nervous glances back at them. Hold up, Dom called, causing both Millers to turn. He approached them, his expression serious but not threatening. Brandon, he said, everyone makes mistakes. What defines you isn't falling down, it's how you get back up. You can be better than this. Then to Mr. Miller, your son needs a father, not a fixer. Trust me on that. With that, he rejoined Zoe, leaving the Millers to reflect on his words. News of who Zoe's father was spread through Westlake High like wildfire. Suddenly, students who had ignored her were seeking selfies and autographs, which she politely but firmly declined. I'm still the same person I was yesterday, she told Maya, who had remained genuinely friendly throughout. Nothing's changed except now people know who my dad is. Everything's changed, Maya corrected her. You stood up to Brandon Miller. No one's ever done that before. Indeed, the dynamics at school had shifted dramatically. Brandon returned from his suspension a changed person, quieter, less aggressive. The rumor mill suggested that his father had implemented some serious consequences at home, including community service and therapy. One afternoon, as Zoe was heading to her car newly repaired and paid for by the Millers, Brandon approached her alone. Can we talk? He asked, his usual bravado absent. Zoe hesitated but nodded. Sure. I wanted to apologize, Brandon said, the words clearly difficult for him. What I did was wrong. All of it. I've been dealing with some stuff at home, but that's no excuse. No, it's not, Zoe agreed, neither harsh nor particularly sympathetic. My dad, Brandon continued, he's never really held me accountable before. He's always just thrown money at problems I caused. But after meeting your dad and seeing how he stood up for you while still making me face consequences, it made him think differently. Zoe studied Brandon's face, looking for signs of insincerity but finding none. My dad says real strength isn't about intimidating others, she said. It's about lifting them up. Protecting those who need it. Brandon nodded slowly. I'm starting to get that. Anyway, I just wanted you to know I'm sorry, and it won't happen again. To you or anyone else. As he turned to leave, Zoe called after him. Brandon? Everyone deserves a second chance. Just make it count. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere at Westlake High gradually normalized. Zoe became known not as Vin Diesel's daughter, but as herself, the girl who stood up to a bully and changed the school's social dynamic. She joined the auto shop club, where her knowledge of engines, learned from her father, earned her genuine respect. Dom visited the school occasionally, always low-key but supportive. He even gave a surprise talk to the auto shop club about the mechanics behind some of his movie stunts, carefully avoiding any mention of the incident with Brandon. One day after school, as Zoe and Maya worked on a project in the library, Brandon approached their table. The basketball team is organizing an anti-bullying event, he said somewhat awkwardly. We're going to visit elementary schools to talk about respect and kindness. I thought maybe you'd want to help organize it. Both of you? Zoe and Maya exchanged surprised glances. Why us? Maya asked. Because, Brandon admitted, you both stood up in different ways. Maya, you were kind to Zoe when no one else was. And Zoe, you confronted me directly instead of just taking it or running away. Kids should hear those perspectives. Zoe thought about what her father would say about second chances, about family being who you choose to stand beside. I'm in, she said. Maya? Maya nodded. Me too. As they planned the event together, an unlikely friendship began to form, tentative at first, then gradually more comfortable. Brandon revealed more about his home life, how his father's business practices had shaped his own behavior, and how he was working to break that cycle. The anti-bullying program was a success, leading to a district-wide initiative. Local news covered the story, inevitably mentioning Zoe's famous father but focusing more on the students' efforts to create positive change. When Dom attended the final presentation, he sat proudly in the audience, just another parent supporting his child. Afterward, he met Brandon properly for the first time since the principal's office. You've turned things around, Dom observed. That takes courage. I had a good example, Brandon replied, glancing at Zoe. Of what real strength looks like. Later that evening, as Dom drove Zoe home, he asked, So, was I right to let you handle this your way? Zoe smiled. Mostly. Though showing up at school looking like you were about to audition for another Fast and Furious movie might have been a bit much. Dom laughed. Hey, I was in dad mode, not movie star mode. There's a difference. Seriously though, Zoe said, her tone softening, thank you for trusting me to stand up for myself, but still having my back when I needed it. That's what family does, right? That's exactly what family does, Dom agreed, his voice full of pride. And you, Zoe Williams Toretto, are the strongest person in ours. The end of the school year arrived with a ceremony honoring the success of the anti-bullying program. Principal Garcia, who had found her own courage through the events of the past months, presented awards to the student organizers, Zoe, Maya, and Brandon among them. These students have shown us that change is possible, she told the assembled parents and peers. That standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult, can transform not just individuals but entire communities. As applause filled the auditorium, Zoe caught her father's eye in the audience. He gave her a subtle nod, his expression saying what words couldn't, that he was proud not just of what she'd done, but of who she was becoming. After the ceremony, as students and parents mingled with refreshments, Mr. Miller approached Dom and Zoe. Mr. Toretto, he said, extending his hand somewhat stiffly. I wanted to thank you. Dom raised an eyebrow but shook the offered hand. For what exactly? For what you said that day in the principal's office, Mr. Miller replied. About being a father, not a fixer. It made me reconsider some things. He glanced at Brandon, who was chatting with Maya across the room. My son and I, we've been seeing a family therapist. Turns out I've been compensating for my absence with permissiveness. That stops now. Dom nodded, recognizing the difficulty of the admission. Parenting doesn't come with a manual. We all mess up sometimes. Yes, well, Mr. Miller cleared his throat, your daughter is a remarkable young woman. She's had a profoundly positive influence on Brandon. She takes after her mother that way, Dom said with a sad smile, referring to Zoe's biological mother. Strong, compassionate, unwilling to back down from what's right. As Mr. Miller moved away, Zoe looked questioningly at her father. You don't talk about mom much. Some memories are precious enough to keep close, Dom explained. But she would have been so proud of you today, Zoe. Just like I am. The final days of the school year passed in a blur of exams and goodbyes. Zoe, who had started as an outsider, found herself surrounded by genuine friends. The revelation of her famous father had created a brief stir, but her own actions had earned her respect. Brandon, preparing to leave for college, had undergone the most visible transformation. The former bully now mentored younger students, using his influence for positive leadership rather than intimidation. On the last day of school, he sought Zoe out one final time. I never properly thanked you, he said. For what? Flipping you onto your back in gym class. Zoe teased. Brandon laughed. For that too, I guess. But mostly for seeing someone worth saving when all I'd shown you was the worst of me. Everyone has more than one side, Zoe replied. My dad taught me that. The trick is finding which one deserves to be nurtured. As students filed out of Westlake High for summer break, Maya joined Zoe by her car. So, what now? She asked. Are you coming back next year, or moving to Hollywood to join your dad's next blockbuster? Zoe grinned. Definitely coming back. I've got unfinished business here. What's that? Building something that lasts, Zoe said, looking back at the school. A legacy that has nothing to do with my last name and everything to do with who I choose to be. Dom was waiting for her at home, a small celebration planned for completing her first year at Westlake. As they sat on their porch that evening, watching the sunset, he asked her the question that had been on his mind. Any regrets? About transferring schools? About how everything happened? Zoe thought for a moment before shaking her head. No regrets. Some things could have gone differently, but then I might not have learned what I needed to learn. And what was that? Dom prompted. That strength isn't just about defending yourself, Zoe said thoughtfully. It's about creating space for others to change. For second chances. For redemption. Dom smiled, recognizing his own journey in her words. That's the hardest kind of strength to find. And the most important. As night fell, father and daughter sat in comfortable silence, both reflecting on the year's events and the lessons learned. For Zoe, it had been a journey from outsider to catalyst for change. For Dom, it had been a reaffirmation that family chosen or born was life's greatest gift and responsibility. The school bully had attacked a black girl without knowing she was Vin Diesel's adopted daughter. But in the end, it wasn't fame or intimidation that had made the difference. It was courage, compassion, and the willingness to stand for something greater than oneself.